organizations are not the same, and you can't just take what works at one organization and impose it on another and hope that it works out well. Hey there, Rafi Salazar from Rehab U Practice Solutions here, and this is the follow-up podcast and video from, a couple weeks ago when I mentioned that we would be talking about culture and building a team and what we can do as practice and clinic owners to kind of rally the troops, if you would. So this came about because of a conversation I had with a practice owner about a month or so ago about retention and hiring and all that kind of stuff. And you can go back and listen to that podcast as well. I'll link to it in the show notes. And we talked about a lot of things, what to do if you're burnt out running your practice. And that was kind of the focus of the last episode, where I talked a little bit about some of the things we can do as clinicians and practice owners if we just feel like we're just not engaged in the practice anymore. So go check that out. This week, I want to talk about building a culture. Now, I've seen this done at big organizations like the Department of Veterans Affairs, across state agencies and departments, and kind of big government bureaucratic systems, all the way down to small private practices. And mainly just because of the work and the nature of my work as a consultant over the last several years, since 2017 or so, I've just had the opportunity to work with varying sizes or organizations of varying sizes. So what I'm going to share with you is really just some patterns and some kind of high-level ideas, how they might work for your practice, and your organization might be a little different, just given your own circumstances and stuff like that. Much the same way that I believe patients are not the same. We can't use cookie-cutter treatment plans. Organizations are not the same, and you can't just take what works at one organization and impose it on another and hope that it works out well. However, there are some overarching principles, and that's what we're going to talk about today. So I've got a list of really 4 things that practice owners can do. So myself, I run a practice. There's 7 or 8 clinicians, a couple admin staff, a couple VAs, and this is some of the stuff that I've implemented at my practice. I might use some of the examples from my practice, but again, your organization might vary. And then these are also principles that I've used at other client organizations that I've worked with and worked on, primarily around building integrated clinical teams and the marketing and business engine for businesses and private practices and that sort of thing. So let's dive right in. The four main things that we can do to build a strong culture, particularly in frontline healthcare, like I'm thinking primarily outpatient physical therapy practices or something like that, where you've got patients coming in. This also works for departments within hospitals and even the hospital systems themselves. Really, some of this stuff is kind of high level and works across many businesses and sectors. Some of this stuff is pretty universal. So the first one is we want to communicate a higher purpose to the team. Number 2 is we want to push or challenge that team in achieving some sort of end or goal. 3 is give everybody a common goal or enemy. We'll talk about that in a minute. And then the 4th one is some kind of ongoing action items. So starting very high level and then moving all the way down to what do we do tactically in staff meetings and team meetings, and how can we make sure that people are engaged throughout the day-to-day process as well. And that's kind of what number 4 is, the ongoing action items and tasks and stuff like that. Let's start with number 1, communicating higher purpose. So this gets talked about a lot, and sometimes I think I even mentioned this on that podcast that I was talking about being engaged. A lot of times, at least in my opinion and experience, the times that I've sat through seminars or even had consultants come in and work with my organization or other consultants working in organizations that were my clients, a lot of the talk around higher purpose and mission, vision, values, and all that kind of stuff tends to be very, very superficial. And it sets a very high and nice and pretty slogan or something that you can put on a wall or put on your cards, but it really doesn't translate to much else. So what I mean when I say we need to communicate our higher purpose to our organization and our team with the end goal of building a strong culture. Is that we're actually talking about a culture shift. We're not talking about just having a higher purpose or mission that we talk about. We are talking about establishing the foundation for all the business decisions, the management decisions that get made, the marketing decisions that get made. A clear example would be areas of expansion or growth. So we have an article that I've written on the website. I think it's called What Next? Planning Your Expansion or something, positioning your clinic for growth and expansion. I'll link to that in the show notes. But one of the big components is, there are three components when you decide, I'm going to go open up a clinic over here. I might develop a new service offering or a new program. And those three components are your clinical expertise or your scope of practice, like what can I do? What are we good at doing? The second is the market need or demand. Is there anybody providing a similar service in the area? Is it too competitive of a space to try to branch into now, or is there a lot of runway? And then the third one is, does this fit in line with our mission, our vision, our values, or the higher purpose of the organization? And when you begin making decisions about the business, you need to have that guidepost, if you would, that sets the course and sets the agenda for all the tactical decisions that get made. So a good example would be, I worked with a client one time, and she ran a private practice. There were, 10 or 11 clinicians, and she got into the tight spot, if you would, of having a machine that she had to feed. She had this giant thing. She had grown the patients that were driving up in her clinical area of specialty, the core component of which she built her business around. And so she was looking at, I need to expand, I need to grow, I need to develop some kind of service offering in order to keep the clinicians that I have hired now. I have to give them work to do, all right? So her entire area of focus up until the point where I came on the scene was she had been doing primarily hand therapy, so pretty specialized work, upper extremity rehabilitation. And recently she had gotten like a couple referrals here and there from some pediatricians who had a child or something that had like a distal radius fracture or something like that. And she ended up getting a few referrals for orthopedic and upper extremity cases for pediatric children or pediatric clients. So she started seeing them, started doing pretty well with that. And then she ended up getting a lot of ancillary referrals from these pediatricians for sensory motor integration, sensory processing, developmental delays, preschool screenings, all kinds of stuff. You know, when you get in with one of those specialties or like a pediatrician's office, like the floodgates open sometimes. You get all kinds of disparate referrals and consults that might not be necessarily in your area of specialization. So her entire business was built around upper extremity, orthopedics, hand therapy, all her messaging, her marketing. Her higher purpose was even something about allowing people to overcome their pain and get back to doing whatever it was. I can't remember the exact messaging, but it was something along the lines of we're making people with arm and hand dysfunctions get better. I mean, they were like the hand or shoulder to hand clinic in their city. Well, now she's getting a bunch of referrals for from pediatricians for developmental delays and sensory motor integration. So she goes out and she organizes and buys the equipment and like sections off a part of her clinic to be a developmental gym or sensory gym. And she has pediatric clients coming in now, and she was just getting stretched way, way thin. And her team now, which was hired with the intent purpose of, I want to specialize in this orthopedic upper extremity rehabilitation, and now I'm getting pulled in to see clients for like kids that are having problems with handwriting in school, and I don't really care about doing any of that. Not that there's anything wrong, it was just she had hired people for a specific purpose, and that purpose was helping people with shoulder to finger dysfunctions get better and overcome their pain or limitations. And now she's pulling in this entire, almost a subspecialty. And it caused some problems. Well, it caused problems on our marketing leg, but then it also caused problems with her staff. There was some turnover because they didn't want to be doing that kind of work. So communicating the higher purpose does two things. One, it ensures that the people that you're attracting to your clinic, the staff, the clinical personnel, you're attracting the type of people that resonate with that purpose and that want to see that mission through. But then also, by constantly reiterating it, it's keeping yourself and or management, if you've got managers below you, it keeps yourself and your managers, kind of the administrative team of the organization, on the same path. So whenever there's a decision about do we follow this opportunity or that opportunity, it always gets checked with, well, what's the higher purpose or the mission? And if it doesn't fall in line with that, even if there's a great opportunity there, we don't do it, because part of picking that mission, part of picking that purpose is a strategic decision, and strategy ultimately is an exercise in saying no sometimes. You need to say no so that your yes actually means something. So number one, communicate that higher purpose, and communicate it often, not only to decision makers like managers and administrators, but also to new hires and interns and people that are working in the organization, because they're ultimately making decisions as well, especially in patient care, when it comes to what they do and don't do for clients and patients, what they do and don't recommend for clients and patients. We want to filter everything through this higher level strategic decision of what is the ultimate goal of the organization. So an example that I use is at Proactive, the clinic that I run. Our higher purpose, our mission, if you would, is we want to empower patients to become drivers in their own healthcare. So what does that mean? That means that we view ourselves and the value that we provide to clients and patients, not so much being the technical skills, the hands-on stuff, but our knowledge translation, our ability to take the vast knowledge that we have from our training and from education and bring it to bear on our client's situation. So because that's the higher purpose, this idea of empowering and educating patients so that they can step into the role of the driver of their own healthcare, it means that we've done a few things and we've began branching into different areas for revenue diversification, but also that are just extensions of that higher purpose. So we have a YouTube channel, and everybody on the team is required to develop some kind of educational content, whether it be a video or an article. We've developed educational products. One of them is the Natural Runner Program, which is an 8-week evidence-based protocol and training plan for transitioning from conventional running shoes to barefoot running shoes, which is kind of like a passion of mine. So it just has worked out. We were able to kind of parlay it into the overarching mission. But because our mission, our higher purpose, if you would, is to empower patients to become the agents of their own healthcare, the protagonists, if you would, in their own story. When we look at decisions from a business standpoint, we filter it through that. And does this article or does writing content or putting in, it is an investment, right? I'm paying people to do non-productive work, quote unquote. They could be treating patients, but instead we're paying them to do some creation, some content creation. It absolutely falls in our higher purpose, because our higher purpose is to educate and empower. So as long as the content we're creating is one, profitable, and two, meeting that higher purpose, then we're going to keep doing it, right? We're not going to go and, invest a whole lot of money and time and effort on manual therapy techniques or manual therapy training for our clinicians, because again, ultimately we don't believe, because of our higher purpose, that that's our role. Our role is to educate, empower, and to encourage patients to become the drivers instead of having to come in and rely on passive treatments. Not that we don't do passive treatments, but that's not the focus of our practice and our service delivery. So all the things we do, the in-clinic services we provide, the educational content we provide, our telehealth and remote and virtual service delivery offerings that we've developed over the last couple of years, has all been driven by this mission, if you would, to let people become the protagonists of their own recovery story. So that's just an example of how we've used it at our clinic to spearhead and to make everybody engaged. The team is engaged about creating content. We have meetings about content and what's going on and what's the next project we're working on, and it's all because we're all on the same page about educating and empowering patients. The second task, or the second thing that you can do, which kind of falls under and kind of builds on this idea of higher purpose, communicating the higher purpose, is to push and challenge the team. So I'm a big believer in the idea that if you're not growing, or if you're stagnating, you're dying. Maybe not from a business standpoint, but from a engagement in your work and feeling fulfilled in the work that you do, you definitely begin losing energy and engagement as you stagnate or regress. So what we do and what we try to do is we should be encouraging our clinicians to grow their skills in whatever specialty area that they're in or that we are in, right? So a good example might be somebody that first client that I was talking about that was shoulder to fingertips, and she had a lot of effort and marketing, and her mission was about becoming the upper extremity go-to place. Well, odds are she had hired a lot of clinicians who were interested in that area of specialization. That's why they would have taken the job, right? So one of the things you can do, or one of the things she could do, is challenge her team to grow in that area. Maybe it's providing opportunities for continuing education. Maybe it's encouraging mentoring and or training for something like the CHT exam or the Certified Hand Therapy exam, or an OCS, like an orthopedic clinical specialty exam or test or something like that. Because while the organization's mission is very important, and it's what kind of attracts people to the calling, if you would, and gets them on board on the ship, we need to give them something that's going to make them engaged as well. And there's a big component of that is professional and personal development. So we have had people come to our clinic simply because of our area of practice, and they want to grow in XYZ skill, and that's why they're here. So we try to provide them opportunities to do that, so that they're engaged, so that they're seeing the types of patients they want to see, so that they're growing in the area of specialization that they want to grow in. And then you can also challenge the team. So again, you find the strategic higher purpose, and maybe that means you're expanding into maybe a diversification of revenue here, or some kind of project over here. A lot of times those expansions or those programmatic developments require things of professionals, right? It's a challenge. They need to develop new skills or new training or new ways of looking at work and life, and the way healthcare is delivered, even if you're going really big and really trying to innovate. And that brings out the best in people a lot of times. Providing a challenge, a worthy challenge to a staff member, to a clinician, is going to make them engaged. So once you communicate that higher purpose, then push and challenge your people to make themselves better, so that the organization achieves that purpose or achieves that mission. And again, then you're mitigating any risk of your team kind of getting on board behind the mission and then falling off because they themselves personally or professionally become disengaged or feel stagnant. Number 3 is kind of in line with that, but give them a common goal or a common enemy. So Simon Sinek writes about this a lot in one of his books. Maybe it's Leaders Eat Last, but this idea that the entire world is dangerous, and we as a species have kind of grouped together in communities and in groups for the primary purpose of not just belonging, but also protection and safety and security. There's security in numbers. We don't have sharp claws, thick fur, big teeth. Prehistorically, we couldn't fight off predators unless we were all together. And a lot of those ingrained biological drives, if you would, are still present today. So we do need to think about how we can, as organizational leaders, practice owners, practice managers, circle the wagons, if you would, or get everybody on the team focused on a common goal and or enemy. So sometimes it could be something like, listen, guys, we are headed into a recession, or one of our big competitors just opened up a clinic down the road from us, and we have a couple options here. We can all try to beat each other out for patients and for productivity or whatever, for scheduled hours or whatever it is. But let's circle the wagons together and see how we can, as a team, get out of this together. So again, it doesn't necessarily need to be in a time of crisis. It could be the common goal. It could be like, okay, our higher purpose, our higher mission is to empower patients to become drivers of their own healthcare. Let's pick a goal. Like, what is a project that we can work on that's going to shore up the business, that might bring in some more money, help us all rise together? A rising tide lifts all ships, right? That's still in line with the purpose. So it doesn't necessarily have to be like, oh man, let's circle the wagons because danger is coming. But danger is a pretty good motivator for folks. If you have a threat on the horizon, odds are you're going to be able to get your team to pull behind your organization and your leadership in that time. Because again, if the options are potentially losing the job and becoming unemployed, or being quote unquote out there on their own, that's not a good prospect for anybody. So they're going to pitch in and try to help out. So give your team a common goal, and when appropriate, a common enemy, especially if this is 2022 heading into 2023 right now at the time of this recording, and there's a lot of predictions coming in for the first quarter and quarter or two of 2023 being a pretty bleak economic outlook for the US economy anyways, for the global economy. And people are talking about the layoffs. Meta or Facebook laid off 11,000 people. Google's laying off people. Amazon is laying off people. These big, giant organizations that have more money than the government are laying off employees. And that just breeds, even though, we're not tech companies right now, we're in the service industry and delivering healthcare. There are technologies that are coming into the forefront as well that are making people a little bit worried. And then the cost reductions that have to happen because of insurance payers and all that, there's all this downward pressure, right? We are heading into a time where people are just uncertain about the future from an economic standpoint. Are we going to hit a recession? Am I going to be able to pay my mortgage next month? Am I going to lose my job? Are there going to be layoffs? And this might be the time for you as an organizational leader, as a clinic leader, or clinic manager or owner, to kind of like call your team together and say, listen, I know what y'all are feeling, and I know that it looks bleak out there, and we don't know what the next 6 months might hold. But we're going to try to take care of each other, and we're going to circle the wagons here. And sure, maybe there might be some decisions that management has to make from a standpoint of hours or pay or benefits or whatever it happens to be. But the reason we're doing it is not because we're trying to make extra money or we're trying to eke out some profit margin. It's because it's better for all of us to suffer a little bit than one of us to suffer a lot, right? And I've had that conversation with client organizations and with my own team at times, been like, listen, we have to do this, we have to make this decision. And I know it's not what y'all want. Obviously, I'd like to pay everybody as much as they want to be paid for working as little as they want to work. But we don't live in that world. We don't live in that economy. So we're making decisions in a way that hopefully is keeping the organization afloat so that we can continue to provide jobs for everybody, but also taking care of our people and our team, even if that means management takes a cut as well or something like that. And sometimes giving that team that common goal, or this idea of being taken care of in safety and trust, means that you need to do or make some kind of gesture like that, right? Like, we're all going to suffer a little bit together so that the team is taken care of. And if you do that right, you're going to have a team that trusts one another, that is engaged, that feels like they belong to something bigger than themselves and are not simply looking out for their own interests at times, right? So hopefully that helps. And then the fourth thing on my list here is just ongoing discussion, action items, and tasks. So again, if you think about these things building on top of each other, you have the higher purpose that sets the strategic vision. We're pushing and challenging the team in areas for that vision. We're giving them a common goal. We're showing them that we're taking care of them. The last thing is we just want to make it practical. We want to keep reiterating that in staff meetings. We want to have practical steps and action items that are being come up with or developed at every staff meeting that are then carried over again and again and again. So, for example, maybe it is you're developing a new service area, you're expanding into another practice location or another practice area, even another area of clinical specialization. You have the discussion at your staff meeting about it. You assign responsibilities throughout the team. Okay, John, you're in charge of developing the performa for this, and Susie, you're in charge of coming up with some of the promotional ideas, whatever it happens to be. You go around and everybody gets an action item, and then you meet again in a couple weeks or next week or whenever you've decided that your next staff meeting is going to be, and you hold people accountable to that. You say, okay, John, you were supposed to develop the performa for our new clinic that's opening up across town. What do you got for us so far? What are your projections? What do you think? Susie, you're in charge of developing the promotions for it. What ideas do you have? And this does two things. One, it keeps those individuals engaged, right? If they have something they're working on, it keeps them accountable, so the end result is going to happen. We're all working towards it. And then also what it does is it gives the team ownership in what's going on, right? No longer is it Rafi's idea that he's pushing upon the whole team and we're just kind of dragging everybody along. It's proactive. In my case, proactive's mission and vision and values are strategic objectives, and this is my role to play in achieving those, right? So it's much more of a different view than Rafi's telling me that I need to develop content, as an example, right? So hopefully that helped a little bit. Again, this is one of those things that is very high level, but can be very practical. You just need to make sure that what you're doing lines up with your own mission, vision, value, your organization, right? This is not one of those plug and play things. You can't take what clinic ABC is doing down the road to build their team and build their culture at their clinic and employ it, verbatim or rote onto your clinic and expect something similar to happen, because you're bringing a different group of people, but then also that original strategic decision, right? That mission, that vision, that value. The end goal is going to be different, or should be different anyway. Anyways, so you're going to need to build all of this around your own specific higher purpose for your organization. And it might be one of those things that the higher purpose, especially for privately held clinics like physical therapy clinics and occupational therapy clinics, chiropractors even, a lot of times for small businesses like private clinics, the higher purpose really ends up growing out of the founder or the owner's higher purpose and the vision, right? So like an example is, again, not to talk too much about Proactive and what we've got going on, but Proactive Rehabilitation Wellness, which is the clinic that I run, I got into healthcare primarily because, and I've said this before on different podcasts and interviews, I got into healthcare because, and specifically occupational therapy, because when I was right before a senior year in high school, I fell and lacerated my flexor pollicis longus at my left hand and some nerves as well. I'm not going to go too nerdy into it, but I ended up in a Kleinert splint, ended up status post flexor tendon repair, which meant that for the balance of the summer before my senior year and into my senior year, I was in an OT clinic and a hand therapy clinic for a couple times a week for the balance of the year and into the following year. So that experience radically changed me. And it made me want to help other people who had overcome or who had experienced those injuries, overcome them. So that's kind of what drove me into occupational therapy. And then being involved in the VA and then doing some of the consulting that I did with the state, I just really saw kind of the breakdown in big bureaucratic healthcare organizations taking away the agency of patients coming to their clinic, and patients feeling like they don't have a choice, that they are disempowered by the healthcare system. So when I was consulting and when I was deciding, okay, I'm going to buy a clinic or start a clinic, start a practice, it grew out of this desire and this purpose that I found within myself and the work that I have done in the healthcare system to build an organization that empowers people, right? Instead of an organization that is just like every other healthcare clinic that tells the patients what to do or what they need to do and sends them on their way. I wanted an organization that put the person receiving care at the center and built everything around them. So that idea, that mission, that purpose, if you would, grew out of my experience as a healthcare provider and a consultant and a professor. And now, because we've got the team, we've got everything in place, proactive rehabilitation and wellness mission still is that same thing, but it's because of, it's something that I came up with. It's really driven by me. And, maybe there's a time in the future where it's grown enough, or the organization has grown and there's different layers of management and all that, where communicating that to frontline staff becomes more difficult. So there's going to have to be systems in place to continue to communicate that mission, that vision, that values. So that's all that is to say that as a small private practice owner that might have a location or 2 locations or 3 or 4 locations, you're smaller. You're not a big healthcare organization like a big medical system that's got hospitals and outpatient clinics and inpatient clinics and subacute and all that kind of stuff. You have a whole lot of control over that strategic objective, over that higher purpose, and how you communicate that. So what you should do, or what you should think about doing as a practice owner, practice manager, is explore that and really, for yourself, think about what is driving me as the business owner, as a practice owner, to do this in the first place. How do I craft a higher purpose, or how do I put that into words so that it is communicable, so that other people understand it? Because once you have that in place, that rallying cry, if you would, then it becomes much easier to hire staff, to train them, to onboard them, to help them make decisions, because they're going to understand that. So perfect example is I just got an application submitted on one of our sites here at the clinic, or one of our pages at the clinic, for a clinician. And what they said in the email, in the cover letter, was that, I was looking for a job. I'm going to be a new grad here in the next little bit. And I read your website, watched a couple videos about how you view healthcare, and it really resonated with me, and I want to be part of that mission. Well, great. We're that's wonderful. Now we've got a candidate that's in the pool that we might be able to pull in soon. And it's all because we're communicating that at every level of the organization. So not to make a super big plug for myself and the services that we provide, but Rehab Practice Solutions, as part of our Ultimate Patient Experience Blueprint, we've actually broken this up and done this component of the blueprint by itself with organizations.